Hello, I'm Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Is racism an invention of Europe, white people, and the West? Well, in this short video, I hope to explain why this idea is complete and utter nonsense. I was recently pleased to contribute to an exclusive report by investigative journalist Steve Edgington, which revealed shockingly that Britain's most important government department, the Home Office, is indoctrinating its staff with the most risible and preposterous fake history in an attempt to undermine Britain and the West and advance an ideological agenda. As part of the Home Office's diversity, equality, and inclusion training, staff are taught that racism was invented by Europeans 500 years ago. Specifically, staff are taught that the origins of racism can be traced back to the Portuguese slave trade of the 16th century. In addition, in order to advance the current ludicrous myth that Britain has always been a nation of immigrants, staff are also taught that 2,000 years ago, in Roman times, 1/3 of the British population were migrants. Now, only the idiotic or deceitful could make such a ridiculous claim. In fact, in Roman Britain, the foreign-born migrant population was approximately 3% of the population, not 30%. In any event, what is the truth? Did white people invent racism? Of course not. Racism has been a global phenomenon for millennia and long predates the rise of Portugal. Indeed, when Portuguese merchants and explorers first arrived in Japan, the Japanese referred to them as barbarians and depicted them as monkeys. The current Disney Plus series Shogun clearly depicts such attitudes. The Japanese attempted to draw superior racial distinctions between themselves and others long before they encountered Western concepts of racial science. Further afield, anti-black racism in the Arab world has existed for well over 1,000 years, in large part due to the Islamic slave trade, which saw millions of Africans enslaved and brought to the Muslim world. Now, whilst the Quran is silent on race, in practice, sub-Saharan Africans were regarded as the lowest and most detestable slave strata in the Arab world. Many modern-day Chinese are horrendously racist towards Africans today, but the roots of this prejudice also date back over a millennia. During the Tang dynasty, Arab slave traders brought African slaves to China. They were known as Kunlun, and these Africans were thought of as frightening and ignorant. Within Africa itself, racism also has a long history. For example, in Central Africa, the Bantu have persecuted and enslaved the physically distinct Pygmies for centuries, whilst in Somalia, it is the ethnically different Bantu minority who are persecuted and marginalized. In nearby Ethiopia, the Abyssinians historically enslaved and hunted the Shankela, dark-skinned Nilotic, which means Nile Valley, ethnic minorities who the Abyssinians deemed to be primitive. And such prejudices continue today. Indeed, in the 21st century, the world's most racist populations are to be found not in Europe and North America, but in Africa and Asia. Now, this Home Office module is an appalling piece of historically ignorant, agenda-driven propaganda rooted in a contempt and loathing for Britain and the West. This is yet more evidence, if more evidence were needed, that our institutions have been completely captured by a new radical elite who prioritize ideology over truth and fact. The long march through the institutions is real, and Britain and large parts of the West are now post-revolutionary societies run by elites whose worldview bears no resemblance to any previous generation. They are cuckoos in the nest.